Hey, good morning. I hope you all had a good evening and today's looking pretty good for you. So just to change speed a little bit today, I'm going to do a show on vaping. Vaping, something that has lots of people kind of mixed up and confused about what's okay, what isn't, all that kind of stuff. So as usual, I got to monkey around here a little bit. And we want to share that screen. And then we want to play that show from the beginning. And there we go. So everything we need to know about vaping, but we're afraid to ask. And there's lots of things that we're afraid to ask about, but this is something that's on lots of people's minds. So I think we'll talk about it today. I also posted a link on my Facebook site this morning about some of the concerns about vaping cannabis and coronavirus. So if you are engaging in that practice, you might want to check that out. But let's have a look at this. So the biggest issue with nicotine, and one of the interesting things about vaping is that most of the conversations about it are directed towards what it's doing to your lungs and how it's affecting respiratory system. And one of the bigger issues with nicotine is that it is a significant factor in affecting our dopamine levels, which certainly affect our mood. Most of you know that dopamine's that pleasure chemical, but it's also a neurotransmitter that is really responsible for brain functions. All of the things that your brain's doing requires dopamine to feed them, to fuel them, to make them work. So as always, I'm going to start with this. So is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? Because we like alternative facts. And how are you feeling or acting because of how you're thinking? So again, if you think this is okay, innocuous, harmless, not a big deal, you're going to continue to do it. And also, if you think that it is better than smoking, then that's going to affect how you approach this as well. And then the fourth one is always, how would you feel or act if you thought differently? So understanding that, if you think something's okay that might not be, you need to change your thinking on that. And as soon as you change your thinking on it, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. I know I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about quitting smoking and how difficult that was, how hard that was for him. And I said, if you keep telling yourself this is really hard, this is really difficult, it's going to feel really difficult. If we change our mindset and start thinking that this is easier than I thought, I really want to do this, I like not doing this, then that starts to create a much more positive reaction towards what's going on with you. So vaping has, as most of you know, has significantly increased in popularity lately. And here's something from the CDC, and you've heard lots from the CDC about coronavirus, but depending where you're reading this, you might not be able to see it, so I'll read it to you. I have to get myself out of the way here, which is something we always have to do with everything, is get ourselves out of the way. Robert Redfield, who's the CDC director, said the skyrocketing growth of young people's e-cigarette use over the past year threatens to erase progress made in reducing youth tobacco use. It's putting a new generation at risk for nicotine addiction, said CDC Director Robert R. Redfield, MD. Despite this troubling trend, we know what works, and we must continue to use proven strategies to protect America's youth and Canadians' youth from this preventable health risk. Youth use of any tobacco product, including e-cigarettes, is unsafe. So if we look at what was going on, and I guess it's important to understand that the reason that vaping has been increasing is because cigarette companies, tobacco companies realized that every year adolescents were getting smarter and smarter and not initiating smoking. That petrified tobacco companies, because if you don't start smoking as a youth, there's very little likelihood that you're going to start smoking as an adult. So really what they had to do was develop a way to make smoking cool again. And this graph shows the huge increase in, sorry, a huge decrease in adolescent tobacco use. It went, it was down under uh, 5% from a high of 30% in 1975. And like, I know when I grew up, uh, it was probably closer to 40% of people who smoked. And because nobody really thought that there was anything the matter with it, and it definitely had that cool factor. So big tobacco has become big vape, but it's up to the same old tricks. Traditional cigarette companies own large parts of the vape and e-cigarette market, and they're fighting against regulation using their old playbook. And so again, you can see that youth vaping has gone up significantly. On the way again. I don't know if you can see that or I can't, but anyway, I'll put me over here. So since 2017, it's significantly increasing, and one of the things that's causing it to increase is advertising, and a lot of that advertising is on social media, and a lot of it is social media influencers. It's sort of outside the, which is falls outside the ad restrictions that a lot of people can use. And so you get people either talking about it or just sending multiple snap pictures or Instagram pictures of them vaping with different devices, doing smoke tricks, all of those kinds of things, which enhance the idea that it's okay and it's just fun. So uh, in an effort to make this stuff cool, they had to come up with a whole bunch of different devices. And these are what they came up with. And those are interesting looking designs. They're things that don't look particularly scary. They don't look particularly harmful. They're attractive. And so part of what the design is doing is trying to make using these things much more acceptable. Remember those 4 questions. Is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? Uh, so you look at this and, well, that looks okay. That's kind of cool. I'd like to try that. And it's those kinds of advertising design techniques that make it easier for kids to enter into this stuff. So is it really safer than smoking? And I know this little video, I find it hilarious, but I've showed this publicly a few times, and people just look at me kind of like, huh? But anyway, it says just about everything is safer than smoking, including juggling knives. And that's probably true. And please don't try that at home. I know people are getting looking for wild things to do, but juggling knives should not be one of them. But if we look at the truth, like, vaping has been advertised as safer than smoking, but there's no research to support these claims. These flavors used in vape juice have been tested for eating, but not for inhaling. Chemicals alter gene expression in the lung cells, and particularly the chemicals seem to interfere with the growth, production, and function of the cilia. And right now, when we are worried about a respiratory pandemic, anything that's going to reduce lung function is probably a good thing to stay away from, because it can complicate your body's ability to fight things off. So Uh, Dangers of vaping. Although vaping lacks some of the cancer-causing agents found in conventional smoking, it's shown that this practice could be harmful to one's immune system. It's been showing that vaping inhibits 358 genes associated with infection fighting in comparison to smoking, which only inhibits 53 genes. And a study conducted by researchers at the University of Southern California showed that 13% of high school students either vaped or smoked in 2014, while 9% smoked in 2014. This indicates that more people find vaping to be attractive compared to cigarette smoking. Additionally, reports in the Journal Addiction shows that the vaping side effects are limited to mouth and throat irritation. 2% of correspondents reported an increase in blood pressure. Although e-liquid and vaping pens lack the same toxins found in regular cigarettes, the truth is that they still contain nicotine, a substance that can be addictive, not to mention that it also causes withdrawal symptoms, which can be the case when people use devices called box mogs. Those are those things that make those big clouds of smoke. Such symptoms include anxiety, irritability, restlessness, insomnia, and more. CDC is quoted in saying that nicotine is as addictive as cocaine, alcohol, and heroin. And I've also looked at studies which indicate that nicotine really is a gateway drug. It's something that starts to teach our brain that something from the outside is okay. So there's basically two types of nicotine. There's free-base nicotine, which is what you get when you smoke a cigarette. And so when you light a cigarette and inhale that smoke into your lungs and it's then absorbed into your bloodstream, it has to undergo a chemical reaction in there to turn it into a nicotine salt. Most vape juices are pre-converted nicotine salts, so that speeds up the action. So when you use a vape, which contains nicotine salt, the buzz that you get from the nicotine is faster and stronger than from a regular cigarette, and that increases the addictive potential of that kind of thing. So nicotine affects three body systems. First is adrenaline. So when you inhale cigarette smoke or vape smoke, the nicotine in the smoke is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream and starts affecting the brain within 10 seconds. This causes the release of adrenaline, fight or flight hormone. Physically, adrenaline increases a person's heart rate, blood pressure, restricts blood flow to the heart muscle. When this occurs, smokers experience a rapid, shallow breathing and the feeling of a racing heartbeat. Adrenaline also tells the body to dump excess glucose into the bloodstream, so it changes your blood sugar. But it also gets you used to that sort of jacked up feeling that you get when you're scared, and your body starts to recalibrate itself to get used to that feeling all the time, and so it's increasing the degree to which you feel stressed, but it seems like the opposite. So it also affects your insulin. That's the raise of blood sugar. Nicotine also inhibits the release of insulin from the pancreas, a hormone that's responsible for removing excess sugar from a person's blood. This leaves the smoker in a slightly hyperglycemic condition, meaning that he or she has more sugar in the blood than is normal. High blood sugar acts as an appetite suppressant, which may be why smokers experience that cigarettes reduce the feeling of hunger. So, again, on one level, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I won't eat as much. But the problem is that when you're like that and your blood sugar is not where it should be, that starts to affect energy levels and affect how you feel. And dopamine, we've talked a little bit about. Nicotine activates the same reward pathways in the brain that other drugs of abuse, such as cocaine or amphetamines, do, although to a lesser degree. Research has shown that nicotine increases the level of dopamine in the brain, which is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for feelings of pleasure and well-being. And as I said before, it's also responsible for monitoring and running brain function. The acute effects of nicotine wear off within minutes, so smokers must continue dosing themselves frequently throughout the day to maintain the pleasurable effects of nicotine and to prevent withdrawal symptoms. So uh, those cravings, the irritability, those kinds of things that pop up are nicotine withdrawal symptoms. And, with all this stuff, the question that we need to be seriously asking ourselves is, am I okay with being uh, functionally dependent on that substance? So here are some questions to ask yourself about your nicotine use. So number one, have you tried unsuccessfully to cut down or quit vaping or smoking? So keep track of these either on your fingers, or if you if your memory is short, do it in your phone, or you could even like go old school and get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil or a crayon and write down the ones you say yes to. So is that true for you? Second one, are you vaping or smoking more often than you were 6 months ago? So has your use increased? Do you feel cravings to vape or smoke? Is it something that that you notice that, oh God, I got to go do that? Do you find it hard not to vape in places that you're not supposed to? So, there's lots and lots of places that are designated as no smoking, no vaping places. But are you kind of sneaking around those guidelines and, maybe doing it in your house, although you've been asked not to, or in your car, although you've been asked not to because you think it's not a big deal? Do you find it hard to concentrate if you can't vape or smoke? Like, do you find your attention is it's difficult to stay focused? Do you feel anxious if you can't vape or smoke? So those two things, 5 and 6, are indicators that if those are true for you, what that means is that that drug, nicotine, is altering your brain function. It's changing your brain and your mind's ability to do what you want it to do. Same with this one. Do you feel depressed and irritable if you can't vape or smoke? Again, uh, what that indicates is that your brain function has been altered by this. And, are you okay with that? Do you feel that it's relatively safe? And one of the things that, that I'm always talking about is we convince ourselves that what we're doing is okay. And the last one, would you like to quit but find it difficult? So if one of those is true for you, that's an indicator that this drug, nicotine, is starting to be problematic for you. If three or more are true for you, then you have a nicotine dependence. Like it is starting to control you as opposed to you controlling it. So a typical smoker goes through several withdrawal cycles a day, followed by increases in stress hormones. So every time your nicotine level goes down, your stress hormone cortisol goes up and increases your stress response. Uh, uh, that's what causes addiction. We're constantly trying to chemically alter that stress response, which we've created. Uh, The social psychological self-regulation failure view describes nicotine addiction as a cycle of spiraling dysregulation of the mesocortical limbic dopamine system that plays an important role in reward and motivation. What that's saying is that nicotine is a regulation drug, which is very true. It's a drug uh, that we start to need to be able to control our response, control our moods, and control our reaction to things. Initial regulation failure sets up impulsive smoking and adds additional negative emotions until you get a large scale breakdown in self-regulation, which results in compulsive smoking. Like you just can't do without it. So symptoms of nicotine withdrawal include intense cravings for nicotine, tingling in your hands and feet, sweating, nausea, abdominal cramping, constipation or gas, headaches, coughing, sore throat, insomnia, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, irritability, depression, and weight gain. Any of those or any combination of those indicates that when you don't have enough nicotine, you're starting to go into withdrawal. And uh, if that's true, you've got to again decide, okay, do I want to be dependent on this drug? And also, like I said before, we've got this belief that it's really hard to quit smoking, and really that's not that true. Uh, if we change our mindset about that, it starts to significantly reduce the complications that we feel, and it starts and absolutely, you will go through some physical withdrawal stuff for 2 or 3 days, but after that, things start to get better very, very quickly. And if we can start to focus on what we're gaining instead of what we're losing, that makes that process much easier. So brain-wise, you see a reduction in gray matter volume between uh, 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 nicotine-dependent people, that's NDs, and controls. Nicotine-dependent people have a reduction in gray matter volume, which is the parts of your brain that are, or capacity of your brain, I guess, to uh, process stuff. Uh, and we start to get changes in our reward system. So the other thing that nicotine does is it raises our hedonic reward plateau, which is the level at which you feel pleasure. So the normal stuff that used to feel good just that doesn't quite feel so good anymore. And so we uh, we need something extra to make ourselves feel okay. So we keep looking for more and more of that drug because it seems to be doing it for us, and that starts to cause symptoms. And the first symptom is boredom. Like if you're nicotine dependent and you start to go into withdrawal, you'll start to feel restless and bored. You'll start to have reduced attention span. It's harder to pay attention to stuff. You lose interest in other things because the only thing that you really want to do is smoke. You get mood changes, you get increased anxiety and increased depression. And again, is that something that you want for yourself? And uh, after that 3 day sort of physical withdrawal period, your mood starts to improve, your attention stands can't talk. Your attention span starts to improve. Things get progressively better. Uh, so, I mean, when your attention span decreases, your perception of stress uh, uh, decreases. So you think you are helping yourself, uh, but you're weakening your stress system. So everything seems to be a little bit more uh, difficult to deal with, and you just find more and more reasons to want to smoke. And regular drug or alcohol use causes depression and makes existing depression worse. It fools us though to make us think that it is helping. One of the worst things we can do if we're struggling with something, like feeling loss or grief, is to use drugs or alcohol to stop the hurt. Even though it's uncomfortable, it is the hurt and working through it that helps us heal. So, one part of the reason I'm doing these every day is because we're in a difficult time here. And we can really strengthen ourselves by learning how to work through some of the stuff that's going on with us. And if we chemically escape from it, we're reducing our capacity to deal with stuff. There's also been an increase in cannabis vaping, and I talked about that a little bit when I started. And again, there's a whole bunch of gadgets and devices to facilitate this. And just like the nicotine vaping, these are designed to increase somebody's profit margin. They're not health devices. They're not they're not things that are good for you, but they're interesting and they seem to be um, more and more popular and very, very readily available. So, you know, you got to be careful with that. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to stop this share. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm back to here. So hopefully that helped you understand a little bit more about what vaping was all about, uh, and get you thinking about whether that's really what you want to be doing. So have a good day. I'll be back tomorrow. And again, if you've got comments or want to add something or send me a video about what you're doing to have fun or make your life more interesting, please go ahead and do that. So thank you. So I have to